Okay, I guess we'll get started. First, I just thought everybody could introduce themselves before we start discussions. My name is Michael Bunnell. I own the Record Exchange for 42 years with my wife. I also run the Coalition of Independent Music Stores, and that's about 50 stores nationwide. I also run a small distribution company that CIMS owns called Think Indie Distribution, and I help run Record Store Day.
How hard act to follow. My name is Christie Coyle, and I'm an account rep with Redeye Distribution, which is a distributor based in North Carolina. We have offices in about 6 countries. I'm based in Seattle and work with record stores in the western half of Canada all the way down through the great state of Texas.
My name is Meola. I'm the record label manager at Tender Living Empire, which is an independent label based in Portland, Oregon. I've been there for about 3 years, and before that, I was in artist management.
I'm Patrick Ferrell. I'm the head of label relations at A2IM. A2IM is the American Association of Independent Music. We are the leading voice for the independents in the business sector of all things that affect independent labels. In the simplest sense, think about us as your union for independent labels. We're out there fighting the good fight for all of you that are artists and for labels to protect and promote your interest in the marketplace and down in DC as well.
Hi, I'm Skyler Locatelli, and I co-founded Freakout Records, an independent label out of Seattle. We also do Freakout Festival, an annual festival in November in Seattle. And my day job is business development for KEXP, nonprofit radio station in Seattle.
Thank you. I think the way we'll run this is I built a series of topics or questions that I can launch into, but at any moment, if anybody has a question about the topic or just wants to talk about a different topic, you just raise your hand and we'll move in that direction. Okay, the first one I have is digital streaming seems to be leading the growth in the music industry, but is that honestly providing income for artists? I printed out a current report about what it takes for streams to pay an artist minimum wage on a monthly basis, and the numbers are kind of staggering, ranging from about 80,000 streams up to 2 million streams, depending upon what service we're talking about here. I think a lot of people I know, you think of streaming as marketing now, not as income, but I'd like some opinions from the cast here, what they think about that.
I've kind of done a little bit of a 180 on streaming in the past few years, probably since I've had this job. I've kind of come up in this world where CDs were never peaking, which maybe is kind of to my benefit. But streams start to add up, and sure, getting 5,000 streams on a song, it's not going to pay the bills, but good music breaks through. And once you start to get a couple 100,000 streams, it's not easy to do that necessarily, but once you do that, it starts to add up. And I kind of see it as part of an ecosystem between indie retail, other retail, licensing, where it all just kind of is additive.
Yeah, I was going to piggyback on that, how, when you listen to a song on a streaming service, that sometimes will correlate with you maybe taking a chance on buying a vinyl record at a record store that you may not be willing to pay this is echoing strangely. You might be more willing to take a chance on a record if you've had a chance to hear a couple of the tracks on Spotify or Apple or whatever your streaming service is.
Yeah, I agree. It's an ecosystem. It is promotion. It's a platform where, if you look at it back when record stores, there was finite shelf space. Now there's infinite shelf space on the DSPs, the digital service providers. And sure, the percentages and the payouts are paltry, and that's something that we always try to hammer away at A2IM. But at the moment, it is providing promotional value outside of just the monetary per stream rate. I mean, it's like you said, people are looking at that to build tours. You're looking at that to perhaps dig deeper and go buy the record at the record store. It is a marketing driver beyond just a promotional vehicle these days.
Yeah, I'd agree to everything everybody said. It's just a platform that you can't get around. That's there, and it is really about the access. But ultimately, it's not paying the band's bills. and unless you have reached this level of streaming numbers, that's kind of outrageous, but it takes a lot to get there. It's a slow build. So
Do you see those numbers changing? Do you think there's a real movement now to start paying songwriters and performers a little better?
The problem with that is that these massive tech companies got away with a pretty paltry rate to start with, so getting rates to go up is very tough. Meanwhile, they're trying to drive the rates down because companies, for example, I'll stop name calling people. It would be PC for a moment. But they're protecting their own interest, and they have to prove to their shareholders that they're valuable and that they're profitable. So how do they do that? They drive the rates down, and that's problematic. So I would say I'm less confident those rates will go up, but it's something that we continually fight for at A2IM.
And I think a lot of the DSPs would be the first to admit that it's kind of the Wild West out there, and they're still figuring it out. I don't think that they think they have all the answers. Streaming's only been around for the past decade-ish, and they know that they have an uphill battle to figure it out between both people listening and on the representation side of the music.
I'd have been a lot more pissed off about that issue.
Boise has a nice vibe. I'm trying to stay very, very positive. I live in New York City, which is one of the most hectic cities in the world. I'm trying to keep it very...
Okay.
I can get upset if you want me to, though. That's what I do every day at the office, but here let's have some fun.
Did you have a question?
Yeah. I think Aaron mentioned good music breaks through, and the tagline of the talk is kind of that the marketplace is flooded daily with music, and I would say with good music. Is there something you look for in artists? I mean, I guess what else are you looking for in artists? Because you can kind of throw a dart and hit good music.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally true. As far as what we look for when we're signing artists, there's a whole set of things that kind of fall into that. But good music does break through. I truly believe in that, but you have to work really hard for it to break through at the same time. And a lot of that's touring, a lot of that's having the right team around you to help you get there, whether that's a label, whether that's a manager, an agent, whatever it is. It's tough to do on your own, but I do believe that music kind of finds its audience. And there's all sorts of people out there making really good music, but I feel like if something deserves an audience, it will eventually find it if people work really hard towards it.
I'll piggyback on that for a second. I agree. I mean, I think thanks to it, I don't want to get off on a bad start saying let's bash the DSPs, is allowed true music lovers, which I believe all of us in this room are, to keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper, right? You find something you like and you get recommended something from their algorithmically based playlist. You keep digging. So that's how people are discovering music. But yeah, I think quality art will always rise to the top, but yes, you need a team. It can't just stand out on its own. You need the right partners to really amplify this. I mean, I was just on a panel at South by Southwest last week, and we talked about this, the importance of labels, because they're there, both of these guys right here are here to amplify your art, because you can't do it on your own. You need a team, and they're the experts that know how to amplify your music and get it out there into the right places. Did you bring that petty cash to pay me off?
Well, that led to my next question, and that was, what role do the labels play, honestly, in digital sales, and do artists really need labels for that part of their business?
Yes.
yes.
Yes, I think you already answered that. So.
I would just say from a distributor side, labels that really push their artists to tag Spotify in a post about a new track, or really work to make your voice heard in a really loud marketplace. That's where we see success with those DSPs. Now, granted, I'm a physical record store representative, but I do have worked in those spaces before, and you see the success with labels that push their artists and have connections and reputations that also correlates to success sometimes.
There's certainly plenty of services out there that any band or artist can go to help them get their music on all these platforms, but the advantage of working through a label is the relationship that they have with their DSP provider, their company that's going to advocate for these artists on a deeper, higher level, because they have a broader catalog and relationship to work with. So, you're talking about smaller percentages when you're working through another entity or a label than maybe what you might get on your own. but you've got a higher degree of chance on getting your song on a playlist that's going to get a lot more streams than if you just put your music out there. So it's really important that you believe in the label to help you grow your digital presence.
And I'm clearly biased at this point. I think you all know this, but I mean, there's this conversation of do labels still matter, or labels still important to artists? It's getting a little tired because, there's all these people that are trying to challenge labels, but they're doing the same exact work that labels are doing. They just, this stigma about being a label and labels screwing over artists, that's like back in the day. These older major labels, for example, and sure, independents too, gave really bad deals, and that's what happened where this conversation kind of started today. But if you look at label services and aggregators, and there's management companies that are growing out their business to look like labels, right? They just don't want to be called a record label. But at the end of the day, they're doing the same work, radio, PR, marketing, sales, that a label would do. So at the end of the day, everybody's operating as a label, whether you want to call it that or something else.
Well, they have a vested interest in your art, and they want you to succeed.
None of us sitting on the stage have a job without the artist, so yeah.
Sort of related to artist income, I just thought somebody might speak to how important touring and merch sales are now.
They're extremely important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of for an artist will really invest a lot of time and resources and money recording an album. We get it, we're investing in it, but it's really tough to make money quickly. And ultimately, it's important for an artist to be able to go out on the road and sell records, make new fans. That's like when I'm talking to an artist and we're figuring out a release strategy, really the first thing I'm talking to them about is how quickly are you going to get out on the road, how many shows are you going to play? Because everything can go right at press and radio, but ultimately an artist has to be out on the road to sell records, and that's kind of the number one thing.
Yeah, and yes, extremely important, and it's the bread and butter for artists to really engage and create new fans and ultimately sell merch and sell records while they're on tour. If without that, there's not a lot of other revenue sources for bands, especially in the beginning of building your career as a band, and so extremely important to tour and merchandise.
I'm sorry, Patrick. Well, I was just going to say sometimes a label, a label can help you partner with another band, and that can get you on tour support, and that's just another outlet that you're able to get in front of fans and impress people and have them buy a shirt or CD or whatever you have with you.
I just wanted to pause for a second because this is something I do when I moderate panels. I'm just curious, who on here are artists? All right. Who here works on the industry side? Who works at a label? How about touring? Publishers? Any publishers here? No? Managers? All right. Cool. We're speaking to artists. This is good.
One more thing about touring, it's also about smart touring. You can go out and book a tour that you're really excited about doing, but you might not be playing to anybody. So from a marketing and brand building standpoint as a band, it's extremely important to, especially if you're booking your own tour, to why am I going from Vancouver to Austin and playing in rooms of 10 people? And spending a lot of that money, it's really important to try and do your best to build an impactful tour, because you're going to spend a lot of time doing that and hopefully getting as much out of it as you can.
I used to manage years ago, and artists would want to do the most insane routes, and I was like, where's the draw, But that's when today, as we live in a digital age, there's more ways to really dig into the data that's available that will allow you to make those decisions, whether the tour makes sense, right? I'm sure you dig into that all the time with your artists.
Yeah. I think a lot of this conversation so far, from the artist's perspective, kind of comes down to what do you think you need? Some artists don't need a label. I'll say that right now. A lot of artists don't need a label. There's a lot of great services out there that allow you to do things without a label. That being said, there's a lot of artists who really do need a label, and there's a lot of artists who really need other partners, whether it be a licensing partner or an agent. And I think it's really important that when you're figuring out what you want to do as a musician for your career, that one, you treat it like a career if you're actually trying to make it a thing, and two, you think about who you want your partners to be. And ultimately at a label, I really see us as a partner, but for our bands that we work with. But a big part of it too is we're a bank when it comes down to it. We're kind of an investment bank, you know, and we're investing in these artists and taking risks and shots, and sometimes they totally pay off, sometimes they don't, but you know, a big part of what we're doing is like co-investing with an artist to help uplift them and make connections for them.
Yeah, but there's these examples, obviously, like Chance the Rapper, right? Everybody's like, well, if Chance can do it, I can do it. That kind of is a false narrative there. I mean, that's like a 1 in a billion, right? I mean, it's possible, but good art does come through. But he also had partners as well that wasn't publicly stated. I mean,
Yeah.
Apple helped that dude big time.
Yeah, I mean, Macklemore is another artist where, you know, you think of him as this like true independent artist, but the truth is he works with our distributor ADA that's making it all happen, and more power to him. But a lot of these bigger artists, when they get to a certain point, they can kind of go direct to some of these distributors and work out their own situation because they're so big that they don't need all the funding from a label.
That's like what Caroline's doing, right? Universal's independent distribution arm. They are very much getting into that label services realm where they're letting artists that are really starting to take off basically form their own labels and act as their label through distribution that's technically label services today.
What advice would you give to a band that is just starting off, whether they need a label or not? Is there any like 1 or 2 factors that
Yeah,
are most important?
you know, there's no like clear-cut answer to that in my opinion. But it's like, what do you want to do? What are your goals? That's one of the first things I always ask an artist when I'm talking to them is like, what do you want to see happen? And usually through that conversation, we can kind of hash out these are either things we can help them with, or maybe these aren't things that we're the best fit for. Because, you know, I only want to work with an artist if it feels like the best fit for every party involved. And, you know, the best deals when it comes down to it are ones that maybe everyone's a little bit uncomfortable with, but you know it's going to be a real partnership. So just whether it's a label or whoever you end up deciding to work with on stuff, just making sure it feels like the right fit is kind of the first thing, and making sure that your goals are aligned.
I think that word partnership is so key because it's a business partnership where you're trusting these professionals with your art, right? So it's like you need to have conversations with multiple partners to see if your vision is aligned with, or their vision is aligned with yours.
I think the biggest thing on this topic is to really understand that the label's not going to do everything for you. You need to have just as much hustle, if not more, than the label's going to have for you, because you're dealing with people like myself. I run an independent record label, but I also have a daytime job, and I've got multiple artists that are coming at me. I need you to be hustling just as much as I'm hustling, and so coming into it with expectations that I'm gonna wonder if a lot of boxes are checked as a band. Like, what have you guys done? How many shows have you played? What's your fan base look like? In order for me to make an investment in you, there's a lot that goes into making that decision. So it's gonna be, but ultimately it's about a partnership, and we want to vibe well with the artist as well. I want to have a good relationship with you, or I can call you on the phone and have a realistic conversation and that kind of stuff. So just from a deep down relationship standpoint, there's that factor, and whether or not you need a label and when it's time to approach that.
You said a really interesting thing about how this is considered the label as like a bank. So when artists are trying to acquire a label, I think the normal thing to do is try to approach it like, we're really good. We fit into this niche. We do these things. But if I understand you right, it's probably a smarter tactic to gain a label by going at it like you're going after a mortgage or some sort of bank loan or something like that, where you create a business model rather than our artistic credentials.
I mean, you have to, yeah, you need both. Ultimately, if an artist, like a lot of the artists on our label are true artists in every sense of the word, and maybe don't understand half the things we're doing at the label on the business side, but maybe there's other people on the team that do. And that's why, again, partnerships, whether it's a manager or whoever else is stepping in there. So I think it's equal parts, I would say, on the artistic side in business. That being said, we're a business. You know, we have employees, we have to pay the bills, and we want to be working with artists who are treating their careers like businesses. And you know, people do that in different ways. There's no exact way to do that necessarily, but I don't want to work with an artist that is just in their bedroom every day, even if they're making like the best music ever. I want to work with an artist who is treating this like, oh, this is my profession. I'm going to go out there and make it happen.
But you also have a love of the art itself, so yeah.
Totally, yeah. That's why we're all here in the first place. We wouldn't be working in the music industry if we didn't believe in
We
art.
do it for the money, man.
The millions of dollars we all make.
That sweet New York rent.
So I own a little recording studio, and I'm really curious as to what you guys think of when like a band comes to me and they say, hey, we want to record with you, but they're not very good. Like, you know, should I record them and just you know, because my name would kind of be on that, but like it's really like me making money from what they pay me, and that's really what most of my money comes from.
Honesty is the best policy. And even if it's, because yeah, like you said, it's going to be your name attached to it. But I get it, it's a tough from a business, how do you turn down business, right? But
Constructive criticism.
yeah. And that can be honesty too, you know?
Well, and it just leads to mass disappointment when you take on artists that really are not going to sell, and you know it from the beginning. You're doing them a big disservice.
So a curious problem that I see with a lot of artists that I've gotten to work with is there is a tendency to expect that their first album, to sum it up more succinctly, an artist will say, our first album needs to be super commercial so that we can get listeners' attention and build an audience, and then our second album can be the album of the songs we really want to write now that we've built an audience. Is that a perspective that you tend to agree with or encourage, or is that something that you find to be misguided? I often find that audiences seem to respond to music that is written with a genuine artistic intent rather than a commercial intent, but I think there's a misconception that it has to be one or the other and it can't be both.
I don't think bands should make records for Spotify. I think you should make a record for yourself and your fans. If you have a partner that is, you know, pitching on your behalf and, you know, selling your music and spreading the good word of your band, you should be able to write a record that is what you want it to be and not something fake. And then you put out, and what if you write that commercial record and people do fall in love with it, and then you put out your second true record and people think it's awful? Then, you know, you've shot yourself in the foot.
I would say be genuine as always. I mean, it's, you know, I think especially I've worked at both independent labels and major labels, and I'll give you one guess which one digs genuine, real music, and which one's looking for that formulaic cookie cutter. Is this going to be a smash hit on top 40 radio? Mm-hmm. This is kind of sidetracking, but I forgot what the management company was. They had like a Grammy party recently. I think it was Milk and Honey, isn't that crew? They did a Grammy party, and they like plastered emails from major label A&Rs throughout the party. And it was like, cool track, but we like this to sound more Spotify. They were describing music as being Spotify. Yeah. It's just like, it makes me want to throw up.
It's
horrifying. You know, like, it's just, that's crazy, because it's like, we'll rack up some streams. It's like, okay, then what's next? It's like you have one single that's Spotify and you get on all the playlists, but what's after that?
Yeah, what happens when you go to a show and there's one song you
Yeah,
know?
it's like you make genuine art, and the right partners are going to be attracted to that, because, again, great music, like Aaron said, always rises. And I think that's something the independents do really well, is that we're not buying into the singles game. Sure, I mean, there's some labels that are independent that have successful radio singles. That's great. They're doing it. It's fine. But albums, we still like to make albums because it builds catalog, and it's a genuine piece of art, and not Spotify.
As a quick follow-up to that, something that I've also found is a lot of artists seem to feel stuck by the towns that they're in, where I think that desire comes from, it seems like the people in the city that I live in don't like my music, whereas my music sounds like artists that I love, and there are clearly cities and audiences for this kind of music. So do you guys take an active effort in saying these are the places that are going to respond to your music well? I feel like the town that I came from had a particular bias towards the songs that they knew and loved and genres they were familiar with, whereas if you're an artist making more experimental or newer music, how do you show or teach artists to find the places and the audiences that will respond to that music?
I mean, that's one area where, when it comes to the DSPs and Spotify especially, I mean, it's exponentially different than it used to be a few years ago, because you can go in and look at similar artists and see where those artists are trending well. You know, maybe Kansas City is just popping up for some sort of music, you know, and you didn't used to be able to make those decisions, and now, especially on the agent side and the routing side when it comes to touring, you can go in and really like see where something's gonna sell tickets in a way that you didn't used to be able to. So that's something that we look at, definitely.
agents are looking at data now.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy. It's that they're not booking acts now just based on what they love. They're looking at data to be like, oh, they're really reacting in these markets. We can sell the hell out of some tickets here.
You mentioned establishing your tour based on data, so you're not wasting a lot of your spots and stops and travel time and everything like that. Where do you get the data?
Booking agents. I mean,
SoundScan.
Yep. There's information out there, and
So a lot of you guys are artists in the room. You should sign up for a Spotify for Artists. I'm plugging Spotify. That's not at all what I'm trying to do. But you can sign up for a Spotify for Artists account, which is a great resource, honestly, because you can go in there and see what markets are reacting to your music. But you can even go, not even through the Artists account, like go look up your favorite band and see what cities are, you know, spiking with that sort of music. And that's data that's available to anyone.
Shazam too.
Yeah.
You can look at Shazam.
Yeah, you can also do that tracking physical sales, and there's plenty of data to do that with too, from companies like Nielsen, which I find a little underreported, to BuzzAngle and several other companies who track national sales by region and cities.
Yeah, we use that all the time when putting together a plan and trying to figure out where we need to place your records as we look at, you know, where your record, where similar artists or your either back catalog titles have scanned in the past, and put a focus on making sure those fans are aware.
yeah, all of this is much more difficult when you're an emerging artist and you don't really have a lot of analytics on your own music, or this, you know, you're available 3 weeks in March to go on a tour, so you have this budget and this time frame, and you're just trying to play some shows out there. So on that level, it's a bit more of a gamble. So just trying to be as strategic as you can as an emerging band to you know, spend your time wisely, even though you're not going to make money off of it.
Start local. Always start local, and then just build out from there. I mean, sure, it's you want to go hit these major markets, but there's not an audience there. Don't waste your time or your money. You know, build out from there.
Are artists that are here on are this like a tour stop throughout something else you guys are doing, or is this you came to Treefort and that's just out of curiosity on my end? Both. Yeah.
Yeah, one question in the back. Oh,
Hello, thanks guys. You guys have touched on it quite a lot, but I was just kind of like specifically interested how you guys approach building these markets for emerging artists. Like, I keep hearing the answer that it's based a lot upon the analytics, you know, that you have, but when I first walked in, you guys were talking a lot about how the record label, you know, you guys suggest that that the artists be on the road trying to sell the records. I'm just interested how you guys work with emerging artists to build a market. Yeah.
I mean, I would say one thing is hitting that same market again. You know, I got one of my bands right here, Smoky Brights. They've done the West Coast tour a lot, and they're from Seattle, and they go down from Seattle down to Austin and back, and they've done that route a lot. And when you go back to the same, say, San Francisco, hopefully the next time there's more people in the room, and then the next time there's more people in the room, and you just keep building off of it. But there's no instant formula when you're just emerging and starting, except for getting the word out there and spreading it every time you go, and hopefully building a fan base within each of these markets.
And I think every band has different needs, but it's really not just about the label and not just about the band for that matter. A big part of what we do at the label is hire PR and radio and bring in other people to help push the album. The distributor helps a lot for that matter. So it's kind of, a lot of times I describe what we do as kind of like the hub of the wheel, reaching out to a bunch of different spokes, and we help kind of assemble a team that's going to help do that. But as Skyler was saying, repeated touring is super important, and maybe you'll have 15 people at your first show, but the next time you go back, you'll have 25, and, you know, hopefully more than that, but you keep doing it and it starts to add up, especially when you have other people helping out. I'm a big fan of college radio, especially with a lot of touring bands that are trying to kind of break through, can go a long way. You're reaching a lot of influential kids that then grow up and become fans of the music. So all these things are really additive and kind of add up.
Also, like what Aaron was saying earlier about, it's as much as effort that you put in, like get out there and make friends with bands that you love. I mean, favors happen all the time, and you might land that support slot for a tour that launches your career. So like when you're doing festivals like this or anything you're playing, just really get out there and work the room. I know networking can be a drag, but it's part of the boogie. You got to do it, So get out there and you might end up on an amazing support slot.
Absolutely, and definitely, just to piggyback on the networking piece, there's so many bands out there, and you don't know what you might learn from one of them, and they happily going to learn something from you too. So it's luckily we work in an industry that is supportive of art, and we're all here because we love music, and so don't forget that, and always put yourself out there and ask questions, and you're in this room, so that's a start.
One little thing just to piggyback on that and kind of, I think, go back to a question that you had earlier was it's not always your first album that's going to do it, I really like working with artists over the course of their careers and developing them. And, we're not a label that puts out an album and it's like, oh, well, that didn't go well, goodbye. We're the kind of label that if we're investing in an artist, we want to be investing in multiple albums, at least for 2, if not more, and really grow with them. It's not doing anyone a service to just put out an album and hope it does well and then say goodbye if it doesn't.
There's got to be so many examples of artists that have been around for a decade and then it finally had their moment. Like Future Islands, perfect example, right? Those guys have been hustling their ass off, and then they wrote Seasons Change, and next thing you know, they're all over TV. And it's like persistence.
Well, and the independent label community is really the one who are willing to hang in there as a career builds. That's not always the case on the majors. I mean, a lot of people get dropped fast if they don't hit their numbers. So the indie sector is a vibrant place to grow.
And also back to that first album being successful and thinking about putting out music in general, it doesn't have to be a full album. You don't always have to put out a full record. The EPs and singles can do a lot for you, and don't take the same kind of investment from studio time to a marketing plan to actually create the same kind of buzz that maybe a really, really good single will do.
I'd like to sort of switch topics slightly, and I'd be remiss if I didn't start talking about physical music goods. There's been a lot of really bad press about how the CD is dead and it doesn't matter anymore. And we get a lot of pop and hip-hop artists not even putting physical goods out anymore. I can't speak highly enough about what a mistake we think that is. If you're trying to help an artist build a career, why would you leave a third of the money on the table? It doesn't make any sense at all to me. The physical business is alive. Has the CD slid? You bet it has. It slid a lot, but it's still relevant. It's still there. It's still a physical piece that your fans are looking for. And the vinyl reemergence sort of speaks for itself. It hasn't completely filled the hole as far as numbers, but these are two things that your artist can still make money on. These aren't streams. These are physical goods. The money actually gets to the artist.
I agree, and I would say, with our community, we work with over 600 independent record labels of all sizes, all genres, and there's a lot of our labels that are in the folk or classical or jazz world, and they see these reports that the CD's dead, and it's like none of these companies came to them to ask them how they're doing with CD sales. Sure, across the industry, if you look at the big guys, the big three, yeah, it's not a priority anymore, but in certain formats, the CD is alive and well, and it's not going anywhere. It really just depends on the audience.
I think with our business, we're at like 60% LP and then about 40 to 45 CD. Also cassettes we sell a lot of, surprisingly. But CDs are such a great tool. If you do an in-store at a record store and you have to kind of buy the record to get in, people might want to just buy the CD because it's a cheaper format if they want to see you play. CDs can be used as in-store overhead play, and what's this song, and the record clerk can help you pick out that maybe the vinyl of it. Promos for radio, promos for we work with distributors overseas, and we use promos that way in the UK and Japan and Australia. So CDs, while maybe not as strong of a format, there's no CD players in cars anymore, so you're not necessarily I don't even think I have one in my car. But having it as a way to share the music in a store specifically, I think is really key. You know, we do a lot of promos and they work, and you know, people can actually take a chance on something and check it out.
And I think it's a very U.S.-based notion. Like you just said, you look abroad, you look at Japan, you look at Germany, some of these European countries, the CD is alive and well and still the dominant format. I mean, Japan, it's by far the largest format for music consumption. Streaming is in its infancy there.
Yeah, you mentioned the radio piece, but I'm putting on my radio hat. That's definitely the medium for radio. I mean, our music director at KEXP has got a stack of CDs on his desk that he's going through and reviewing and deciding which one of these gets into rotation. Radio PR companies that we work with that are using CD as the format to get to all the radio stations throughout the country. So a promotional tool, the cost is great. You can get a CD for really cheaply. You can get them in any quantities, and so you don't need to buy 10,000 CDs as a band or 10,000 cassettes or 10,000 vinyl. You can get that in lower quantity, and when it's out, order some more.
Well,
It's
and
still
it's
the highest
fast,
quality. It's the highest quality format too. People, I mean, I'm a vinyl purist, but CDs, by all technical standards, sound better than vinyl.
It's a fast
true.
medium too.
It's true.
You can produce physical goods in rapid order if it's a CD. You're not waiting 8 to 10 weeks on vinyl. You know, you can turn stuff around in a week.
And that's a great thing to have on tour too, because it's a lot easier to bring a 30-count box of CDs with you than lug around, you know, vinyl that can get damaged, and then it's just useless once it's a ding corner or something gets warped or whatever the case may be. Vinyl's so finicky. But yeah, I mean, that's another thing you can have on your merch table and people can just pick it up. They might not have enough cash for a record or t-shirt, but they might be able to buy that $10, $15 CD.
And that costs you $1.50 or less to make, so you got a great profit margin.
Just a little footnote for TLE, is that working? I don't think I need the mic. But our physical sales were up 50% last year, which I feel really good about. And a big part of that's international physical distribution too. We didn't have that until last year. By going international, we, upped what we were doing for physical 50%. So it's definitely not dead.
For like a DIY artist, for the folks who kind of work in the more physical world, how would you recommend an artist even trying to get into physical distribution themselves, like in terms of trying to build up that sort of market for physical distribution to record stores just on their own? And how might they do that?
I would say yes, because having a distributor or a label in some cases, but we do a lot of promotion for bands. We set up in stores at record stores. We send out one sheets and promotional materials about a release that you have coming out, and that taking that off of your plate will allow you to actually focus on what you're doing, which is being an artist. So I would say yes. Even we work with teeny tiny bands that only put out one record every couple years and don't have a massive fan base, but we still work to get them in stores when they're on a tour, partner them with records that are related if you like, things that might have a little bit more of a profile. So yeah.
Once again, my turn. Once again, it sort of speaks to the strength of having a label and having a distributor, because that is exposure. And it is hard to distribute stuff yourself and get any kind of coverage. There's got to be a story. I mean, in my distribution company, we get thousands of pieces submitted a year to us for distribution, and we often say no because there's not a story. There needs to be at least a regional story. We're not there to disappoint artists. So, I mean, it's still important. That sort of help getting exposure is critical.
I think it's similar to what we were talking about when you're building a market by touring. You do the same thing within the record sales within that market. If you're going to go to San Francisco and you're going to play an in-store, or you're playing a show, or you're not playing anything, you need to build that market there too. And so sending 1,000 CDs to one of these distribution companies that are going to sit on some shelves, so you're not really going to make much of a margin off, not much selling there. It's the same thing. You gotta build that up too.
Take that CD to 1234 Go in San Francisco and give it to the shop owner. That's what you can do with those CDs if you have them available for promo use.
Well, and there's different models of distributors too. My company, our model really, our target audience is independent record stores, and that's pretty much exclusively what we do. We solicit stuff to the stores, and then we decide after that whether we're going to carry it if the numbers are decent enough. In that model, you're not going to have huge returns coming back because we sell stuff one way, but there's also resistance from the stores because they've been burned a lot on one-way product, i.e. vinyl these days, which is a big problem in the stores with overabundance of vinyl titles. So there are a lot of different models out there that I think can help you work through a system where the chances of you getting burned or stuck with too much product can be eliminated.
One thing just to plug a little bit on behalf of yourself are things like CIMS, where you can do retail marketing in independent record stores. And without a distributor and without a label, that's really tough to do. But and honestly, before I worked at TLE, I didn't know a whole lot about that world. But when you walk into the record store and you see the featured records on the wall, you see what's happening in the listening stations, a lot of people discover music that way, and that's super important. And that's what CIMS does in a lot of ways, is help bring to the forefront titles that people should be seeing and hearing. And there's a lot of value in that. I remember being a teenager going into record stores more like Sam Goody, and it's all these like top 40 titles or whatever. But now there's awesome stores like Record Exchange here in Boise that you can go to, and there's really awesome independent releases featured on the wall, and that's because of the retail coalitions that are out there and the retail marketing that you're able to do through a label or a distributor.
Yeah, the strength there is a label can, or through the distributor or direct, can come to a coalition like mine, and they can push one button and all the marketing goes across the entire breadth of stores. It's a one stroke accomplishment, really. And we are truly a marketing company on that level. And that's helped a lot, especially as personnel's gotten thinner and thinner at the labels and distributors. There aren't a lot of field people left. So you've got to look for tools that can help.
I was wondering if you guys could talk about PR cycles as far, and particularly between albums and singles and EPs. And the reason why I asked this is we put out a record, and then the 3 singles all got on Spotify playlist, which is awesome. But then I look at their numbers compared to the other numbers, and I'm like, why even release the whole record? Why not just keep going with singles and small releases and get cycles on each of them? What do you guys think about that?
We were talking about this at breakfast this morning. I mean, it's how everything's changed, right? We came up in a time where, well, never mind. I came up in a time with cassette tapes and CDs, but now, like when I started getting into the industry about 10 years ago, it was all about blogs and those features, right? You were looking for those primo spots on Stereogum or Fader or Pitchfork, whatever it may be. And now that we've shifted to this digital climate, you start to question what the value of those features are, right? And this is no disrespect to any of those outlets. Are amazing. They've been massive champions of independent music, and I have dear friends who work at publicity firms. It's just getting tougher for them because they're those print and digital platforms, their whole business model is changing now. So it's tougher and tougher for them to serve the community like they used to. I'm interested to hear what the label guys have to say about this, because they're the ones that have to tell their artists when they're not getting placements now.
Yeah, it's really tough. These days I'd much rather have a song show up on a Spotify playlist within a couple weeks of it coming out than worry about some premiere, because like you're saying, you get these premieres and then what, I do think that press helps tell a story. It can be really beneficial when it comes to booking. It can be really beneficial when it comes to even getting into retail in certain capacities. I mean, press is important, but the value of it and kind of the shock value of getting on Rolling Stone or whatever it is has definitely diminished. But I still think it's important to do. I see a lot of bands out there spending a lot of money on PR. We spend a lot of money on PR, and you know, a lot of times we're just kind of throwing it down the toilet, to be honest. But sometimes, especially when everything's kind of going right on an album, it can really help when radio's going, when PR is going, when the band's touring, and it just makes it look like there's a lot going on. So there's value in it, but you definitely got to be frugal and careful with what you're doing. And like every band that comes in to meet is like, what are we going to do for PR? Where are we going to premiere our music? That's like 90% of the time what bands want to talk about, and that's like 90% of the time what I don't want to talk about.
Because it needs to be more than just the feature, right? Like if you have a new video or a new single, it needs to be much more. Like you're touring. If you're out on the road, publicity is definitely of value, you know. But if you're just looking to get a feature, then what's the end goal? Is the retainer you're paying worth the views that you're getting on that website? Because I mean, I think we all know, thanks to the abundance of music, we've become extremely ADD. And you go, like, that's the thing. You go and you check Stereo Gum or whatever website it may be. You listen to it. You're probably on to the next thing 5 minutes later. And do you remember it? So it's like, is it worth it? That's curious, because
the staying power with a single is like totally changed now. It's just every day there's something else, and you're, you know, whether it's music or whether it's something in politics, like there's so much noise and it's hard to focus on anything, frankly, but
thanks, Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much else I can add to that. I totally agree with what Aaron's saying too. It can be so much of an investment for the artist and the label for one piece of premiere that's probably not going to do that much for you anymore, unless you have this whole package going towards you and you're on tour. And just like he said, the single game is there. I see it in radio every day. I get an email from our music director that says new singles added, low, medium, high rotation, and that can be anywhere from 5 to 20 singles a day.
One thing kind of related, just to add on to this, which is kind of a personal challenge for me and probably a lot of us up here, is with PR and kind of in the old school, like, it feels weird to say old school, but in the old school world of PR at this point, you know, there's hundreds of writers out there that you are pitching to, and maybe a couple of them are interested and they pick it up, but you have kind of this transparent back and forth. Nowadays with the DSPs, you're emailing like 8 editors basically who you don't have a direct relationship with, and it's a very kind of gatekeeper mentality, and you don't build relationships with them. When you're working with bloggers and PR people, especially, you know, a few years ago, before kind of the current incarnation of what's happening is going on, it was really easy to develop a rapport with people. And now, you know, we're sending these pitches out and I have no idea if they're even looking at them, and maybe it ends up in a playlist, but it's really tough to trace that back to any one thing that we did.
I guess, hello? Yeah, the PR cycle and the release strategy, and I was really curious about your perspective on maybe trends in video production, like music videos. Where's that going? Maybe anecdotal experience on what you guys are looking for as, you know, labels, and anecdotal successes or failures, you know, that from your experience.
I don't have the budget to pay for a video.
Like artists love the video, right? And you're like, it's a promotional tool, but they get expensive. And again, so once you make the video and then you put it on a website, are people really going back to watch the video over and over again? Like you're going to say stream a song or drop the needle in your record player. Like I think videos are great. If you have the budget, sure. But it's what's the ROI from the video, you know? And I get it. It's part of the whole package. It's content. You know, everybody needs endless content now to promote your music, but for these guys, I feel for you, because I know every artist wants to do it, right? And you're just like,
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like it's just a box that we check, to be honest. Like, I'm not the kind of person that goes and watches music videos a lot. You know, there's actually an artist right now who's making amazing music videos that I'm really into, and part of the reason I'm interested in him is because of the music videos, but he's also making those music videos because he works at HGTV during the day and comes home with a camera and makes awesome music videos for free. You know, yeah, being resourceful is super important. I mean, you know, the days of an independent label spending 10 grand on a video are just like, you know, one of my challenges with videos right now is I feel like we're always kind of winging it. Even, you know, if we spend a couple grand on a video, it's tough to know what we're going to get back. You know, when we're working with an album, an artist that's recording an album, there's a lot more of a dialogue back and forth. But oftentimes with videos, I'm just kind of setting a director and an artist free and hoping it shows up like the treatment and hoping it's badass. And a lot of times it's tough.
Yeah, one example, I have no idea what they spent on this video, but I thought it was cool. Suicide Squeeze, another label in Seattle, and they just put out the new Death Valley Girls record, and somehow they got a video with Iggy Pop eating a cheeseburger the entire video, and it was like, their band is not even in it, but I'm like, I was like, that was really fucking cool.
But it's it's memorable, and you're talking about it. So
I was just about to make a joke, like if Drake retweeted your video, then I'd say the ROI is there. But like if you can get Iggy Pop in your video, that's pretty dope. I mean,
it's more appropriate to this conversation.
Yeah. And back to the PR side of things, there's a lot of blogs and outlets out there that don't want to just do track premieres anymore. They want video premieres. So then it's like, oh crap, we got to get the video together by this date ahead of time now to like get the premiere. And then the video does premiere and still not a whole lot happens. So it's tough out there with videos. But you know, Instagram and all sorts of video content places are obviously super important. But then you're talking about 15-second little clips. And you know, my label, we're not really in the world of making those little 15-second clips and content tailored to that, but I feel like we should be. And that's definitely a direction when you're talking about kind of the future. That's, to me, that's the future, but I'm not there yet.
Like joking about content, but I did overhear in a conversation this digital marketer who will go unnamed talk about snackable content. I wanted to run to the bathroom and just vomit. It's just like, what, snackable 15 seconds and then ADD kicks in and see you later. But yeah, I get you. That's a lot of work for little return as well. Get on your snackable content, artist.
I got some advice a while back that it's more important to get better than it is to get attention. Do you think there's an equilibrium point with any of this?
I think the better your content, your art is, the attention is going to naturally follow, you know?
Right, and if you have attention and it's not polished and well thought out, then maybe that's negative attention that you don't want.
Is there a point though? Because you want to pursue, right?
If we knew that, man.
We don't. It's quite the conglomerate up here.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the point.
I'd like to hear maybe how important do you think radio airplay is? I mean, I think that is also diminished over the years with the, you know, with the internet going berserk. How much are you focusing as labels on radio airplay?
Well, I'll start there. I mean, we have a wonderful radio PR guy who's an independent. He's Tiger Bomb Promo out of Athens, Georgia, and he works with a lot of different indie labels, individual artists, and I have a really great personal relationship with him, as do the bands with him too. He's making, you know, we're not paying as much as you would for a premiere on your potential of getting a premiere on a blog that we do with a actual viable person, human who's talking to radio people that he has relationships with. Smokey Brights can call up some radio station in Pennsylvania and offer to do a station ID for him. You're building a community in a market that your music might not normally be heard in. So I think it's really, really important. Radio still is to this day. KEXP's kind of been talked about to be the behemoth of radio stations in the world. Getting on a KEXP live session is a game changer. You go from, you could get 1 million views after your video comes out. So that's a different form of, not every radio station has a live component to it, but even those DJs grab a holding of your music and spinning them and hitting that audience. You know, KEXP has an average of 175,000 people a week listening and 500,000 people streaming a week. So that's an audience that you're hitting by being on a radio station that is with a captive audience, not just a commercial radio audience, a captive audience.
And KEXP is so unique too, and there's other stations that have this as well, but just since I'm from Seattle and get to listen to them often, there are different genre-focused shows, which I think is really fantastic because you can have an Americana band get premiered on Swingin' Doors, and then there's local Seattle Audio Oasis that is only for local artists, and there's just a lot of different kind of pockets that you can focus on. If you're into a certain genre of music, you know that you can go to that station and hear what you want to hear.
I think it helps with touring a lot too. If you end up on rotation on KEXP or a station like that, Radio Boise here in town, you're gonna have more people out at your shows. That's just what it comes down to, And I see a huge value in, especially college radio. Personally, I discovered some of my favorite music when I was, 20 years old because my friends were working at the college radio station, and I'm still a huge fan of that music today. And a lot of times the kids that are working at the college radio stations and radio in general are the tastemakers and the influencers who are going to go tell their friends, and then their friends tell their friends, and it's really kind of a starting point to this whole ecosystem, which is where this whole conversation started. Radio to me is like a real tactile way to get people involved with what you're doing.
From a promoter perspective too, I have both ends of this because I put on a music festival, but I also work with promoters at the station that are emailing me asking if KEXP wants to present this show. So they know that it's a proven method to get the word out about the show. Are you gonna sell 500 more tickets because you bought a campaign on KEXP as a promoter? That's sort of something that's not that tangible, but you are getting the word out about a specific show, and it's helping driving the overall campaign of a show.
Do you think that the internet and like Facebook and Instagram are still applicable and effective ways to advertise your music as an artist? As 20 years ago or like 10 years ago, I mean.
Unfortunately, here I'm getting political, but unfortunately, yeah.
They definitely shouldn't be ignored.
Yeah, it's like a necessary evil, and definitely a deep evil too. But it's like if you don't do it, then what?
All right, I'm gonna get political. Let's do this. The radio industry, right? $15 billion industry. That's almost double the recording industry's revenues. They don't pay a single cent to rights holders, labels, or performing artists. Only songwriters and publishers get paid when your music's being played on the air. That is an inherent wrong. It's been going on for 100 years. That's something that we're fighting for really hard at A2M right now. It's mind-blowing. We're one of the 4 advanced nations, along with Iran, China, and North Korea, who does not pay creators for their art being paid, while this is a $15 billion industry.
Yeah.
And I'm done. Let's keep going.
And once we get
Sounds
that money,
like
we'll just spend it on
Spotify again to
Facebook.
me.
And then the tech, well, that's a whole nother thing. How much time we got? Sorry, let's answer your question though.
Social media is obviously still a proven medium for artists. It's amongst the many platforms you have to spread what you're doing, what's coming out. You've got a fan base there. It's a direct fan base. People are using it, so it's still a tool that you should use.
I think something that fans respond to is also just that you're able to engage directly with them, responding to an Instagram comment or sharing a picture on their Instagram story or something on Facebook. That sort of like, this artist that I love noticed me, and it's a bit narcissistic, but don't we live in kind of social media is narcissistic? So I think that really can translate to just increasing that fandom and having people really appreciate that you notice them.
Yeah, and as a band, it's like the LinkedIn for bands, like you network with other bands and labels and festivals via social media, so that's helpful.
It's like back to what I was joking about, like say a very successful artist retweets your song or shouts you out. That's promotional value right there. So yeah, I'd say it's worthwhile.
I don't have the answer to this, and we deal with it every day at work, but it's tough to know when to spend money on ads, when not to spend money on ads. That's something we're battling through all the time. And recently, like I said, it's a necessary evil. I've been feeling like we have to do it because other people are doing it. But even when we do it, I question, are we doing it right? And there's all sorts of tricks and tips and these optimization people out there that maybe don't understand the music industry. And it's really tough out there. And it's, another area that's kind of the Wild West.
Sort of relating sort of the radio part of that with what you were talking about earlier. What are sort of the pros and cons of distributing to radio with physical versus digital mediums?
I think the CD is still really the best medium for that. It's you can do it digitally, like our music director will open digital files, but there's also a tact when you email things. Like they don't want a long story email about your band. Like it's got to be pretty cut and dry and simple. So that's why shipping a CD that's really basic, that has your info there, is going to get opened and listened to.
Put together a really solid EPK. I mean, have it all right there in one place. Because I mean, we all burn our eyeballs out every day looking at emails. Tangible goods always help every once in a while.
Yeah, you can package a one sheet and fold it up in a CD, and then you have all your information about yourself plus your art in one place.
Well, and as far as distribution in stores too, I mean, we actually have some distributors and labels who try to send us digital files, which is absurd. I mean, a lot of stuff that we see and play from promo copies gets stocked in the stores because of the strength of the music.
Thanks. If I can go back to the advertising question for a second, I'm wondering if you guys have seen any non-traditional or maybe offline or non-social media strategies that have been successful. Anyone got any anecdotes about that?
Label heads, come on.
I mean, it depends release to release and who the artist is, and ultimately when it comes to that stuff, you want to do stuff that feels authentic to the artist. We've had successes doing stuff, we've had failures doing stuff like that, but it really just comes down to who is this artist and how are we going to talk to their fans. So, assuming you're an artist, think about who your fans are and what would be a cool way to reach them. Back to just the retail marketing a little bit. I mean, that's something that at TLE we do really well with. We're a relatively small indie label when it comes down to it, but being able to get our product positioned next to, some sub pop record or whatever it is really beneficial to us. So for us at TLE, that's one of the, I don't want to say untraditional because to me it's more traditional, but something that maybe some people aren't thinking about ways that we market stuff.
If you're a band, the best place to do that is at a show.
Yeah.
You're there, you're playing, you're performing, they get a chance to hear and see you perform, you get firsthand what your art is, and you've got an instant fan base right there to talk to. And so just selling yourself and getting to know what did you like about my song, or whatever conversation you want to have with the people that just witnessed your performance.
Ben, did you have a question? You had your hand up a while ago.
Sorry. I came in a couple minutes late, so I missed the beginning. You guys might have already covered this. I'm really sorry if that's the case. But I was wondering if you could all maybe talk a little bit about how you started working in the music business and what drew you to it, and when you decided that you wanted to make it a career.
I started at college radio, and I DJ'd my senior year and fell in love with Trans Am and tobacco and all these weird independent artists that I'd never had any exposure to, and just fell in love with it. And North Carolina is not necessarily the music the hotbed that maybe New York or LA is, but there's a distributor there that I work for called Redeye, and it took about 4 years of persistently sending my resume to a black hole and just trying to get in whatever way I could. And so I always knew I wanted to do something in this industry in some capacity, and independent music is a deep love, and I feel lucky to be able to be here and talking to all you great artists and see all you guys.
I just had a bunch of friends when I was in college that were making music. I've never really been a musician myself. I used to DJ a little bit, but all my friends were making awesome music, and no one was really helping them organize what they were doing. And I just kind of stepped in and helped organize what they were doing and started promoting a lot of shows, and started kind of a bedroom label called Dropping Gems back in the day, which over the course of a while kind of grew into this thing, and we got investments, and then those blew up, and all sorts of stuff happened. I got a video internship with Matt Decent, but it started out really because I was into video stuff, and I started making videos for some of my friends, and just kind of went from there. But it's been a slog, I feel really fortunate to be at a label now, but it definitely hasn't been the easiest path. We do this because we love doing it, not because it's the most lucrative thing.
I moved to New York in 2008. I sold my car. I didn't have a job lined up. I was like, I'm going to get in this business. Because at the time, I'm from North Carolina as well. And it was either Merge or Redeye, but I wanted to get out of New York. Jesus Christ, North Carolina. And experience something new, right? Being from a small town, I was like, I got to move to New York. And about a year and a half into paying my New York dues, as they say, I got my big break, and I started doing radio promo at Capitol Records. I spent about 5 years there doing radio promo and A&R. And then I moved over to Spirit Music Group, doing A&R for them on the publishing side. And then I managed artists on my own, consulted for some labels. Then I tried to escape the music business by helping my buddy open a record store, really escaping the music business. And then I've been at HYM for 3 years now. So that's my very quick history in this insane business.
I got my start in college radio as well. but I actually grew up in small town Idaho, like a couple hours from here, and seeing shows in Idaho as a kid is not like what it is today. And thankfully, we have Treefort. Like this festival is such an inspiration to what I do and to what it's doing for this community and the Northwest in general. So we should just give Treefort a round of applause
No doubt.
right now.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, I was a radio DJ in college and then became an electronic music director for the station. And then I moved to Seattle and then was in a variety of jobs and started getting into promotion and putting on shows. And then I founded a music festival and then jumped into another music festival and then started a label and then started working for KEXP.
Well, I was a music collector, and I was working up in the woods and had a logging accident, and it threw some money in my pocket, and I thought, I better find a way to make money on buying all these records, honestly. So that just sort of became a passion, and I love buying things. So it worked out fine, you know.
Michael, can you talk about the evolution of Record Store Day and how all that came about?
Yeah, well, basically, the three coalitions were having meetings together in '07, and one of our members came up to us and said, well, we really should have a celebration of the culture of the record store. And everybody said, that's kind of a dumb idea, but let's try it anyway. And then we went to the labels, and all they wanted to talk to us about was vinyl, which really got us going because we were all still vinyl lovers. And it grew from there. It caught fire. I mean, it's been an incredible ride for 11 years. We're worldwide now. Every continent but Antarctica has a record store day. It's billions of dollars are changing hands. It's promoting, catalog as well as new artists. We've done some wacky things, including this record store day. We're going to come out with a 3-inch record player, which is going to be an interesting experiment. But it honestly started the resurgence of vinyl. That first record store day is what began everything. And we've continued to ride that tail and try to make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And now we have to now hold down the number of releases that come out. This year will be about 400. And that's holding it down. I mean, we probably had 800 submitted. But our fear was that someday we were going to put a record store out of business by them getting a little over-involved in buying too much product, and that really frightened us. So we're trying to now sort of put controls on it so the stores can afford all these goods. But it's been a phenomenal success, and honestly, I think the vinyl resurgence has a lot due to us starting that phenomena that day.
Should be a shining example that, as you said, dumb ideas can be great ideas. Mm-hmm. So don't really question those dumb ideas and maybe give them a shot.
So it's only a matter of time now until there's a new Napster or a new Spotify. And if there are any attitudes or tricks in your bags that you guys are preparing for the next thing, or anything that got you through the last pivot and that allowed you to recalibrate and stay relevant and successful?
Tesla's coming, get ready.
I was going to say, you've had the most longevity.
Yeah, I mean, I'm strictly physical goods, so we just suffered, horribly when piracy started, and we've had to, it's taken us years to recover, and now we are all back on our feet, and that's been a really good thing. But it took a lot of hard work.
think the whole
we
industry,
lost
yeah, the whole industry
1,300
suffered.
record stores, I think, when it really started. I mean, you know, there are about that many left in the country now, but it was pretty tough for those early years. I know we had to sell everything we owned basically to keep the store running, and so did a lot of these people. So you get how dedicated they truly are to the art of music, because there's not a lot of money in it, honestly. There's a lot of work in it.
Yeah, that's well, the dedication to just persisting through a tough time. I was not at Redeye during the recession in 2008, but we had to cut staff down, and I think it was a Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings CD that we had sold to Best Buy, and we sold them, like 100,000 CDs. And right during that, kind of negative time in the industry, we got a return for all of that stock, and just like that feeling of, oh my God, like, things are already kind of struggling, and then we had this, $1 million return. So, but just, trying to figure out what, focusing on artists that are successful, and, making sure that you're staying true to your partners that, support you, and, trying to stay ahead of organizations like A2IM are helpful in that sense, and just, kind of have your back in those cases. So thanks, Patrick.
I'm an advocate through and through, and that's the beauty of A2IM, is that issues that you guys are facing, we can fight them without having anything to lose, right? So if Redeye has an issue with a big partner, if they're vocal about it, it could have a negative repercussion. Whereas we're more than happy to do this. That's our purpose. That's why A2IM was founded. It was to be a central voice to, again, protect and promote the interest of independent music companies. So you're welcome. Thanks for being a member. Again, we're a nonprofit, so without these guys, I don't have a job. So, thank you.
From the label perspective, like, I'm gonna rely on the expertise of my distributor to help navigate that industry for me. So, and then folks like him are gonna be that secondary resource. It's gonna help navigate them, and so forth. So, I don't really know the ins and outs of all the digital landscape and new platforms that are coming about, so I'm going to learn about that through my resources.
Done. I think we're out of time. We'll be around all week. Yeah. We can hang out. We can keep talking. Yeah? Yes. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Thanks for listening.